For Creamy Media's Polity, I'm Tabi Shomolikai. Writer Tanya Zack joins me to unpack her book titled The Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a Port City. Your book, The Chaos Precinct, presents a compelling narrative of how migrant Ethiopians have shaped a trading post in Johannesburg's inner city. So, can you talk to us more about what inspired you to write this book and the research involved?
Thanks, Tubby. So the book, as it says, does trace how Ethiopians shaped this, what is a cross-border shopping hub in the inner city of Johannesburg. It is in an area that's southeast of Park Station. And it's an area that centered around Jeppe Street, which used to be sort of the Harley Street of Johannesburg, the place where there were multiple medical high-rise office towers that emptied out really from the 70s onwards. And this is a space which has become secret shopping centers, not so secret anymore because it's been there for between 20 and 30 years, but a space where cross-border shoppers come to buy Chinese fast fashion in what are cupboard-sized shops that have been created from the repurposing of office space. And it's an extraordinarily vibrant, dynamic hub that is a globalized hub in the center of Johannesburg. So what inspired me is I'm a town planner. I've always lived and worked in Johannesburg. And in around 2009, I was taken to some of these buildings. And I was overwhelmed and excited and also surprised about what was happening in the city that I grew up in and where I'm extremely well qualified to understand a lot about the city as a planner. But I didn't know what was happening in my own city, what on earth was happening here, but it felt important. It felt like there was a fundamental shift going on. There were languages, I couldn't begin to understand, people I'd not seen in our city, and that captivated me to begin what became, ultimately so far a 15-year research journey.
And as we've just said, that GP has been the center of your work during your days at the Johannesburg City Council, and it has been your personal study over the last 15 years. So, how has your understanding of GP evolved over time? And what are some of the major challenges you've seen traders face in operating there?
So my research has been both academic and also what might be personal, because I went into Jeppe. Obviously, I look like an odd character. I'm a middle-aged white woman walking around with a notebook. And so I'm an object of suspicion in Jeppe. And in my book, I tell you about that, about the various things people sort of suspect me of doing in that space. But it took a long time to build trust for what was my personal interest, which was to understand personal stories of people. And those are in the book. But overlaid with that is this extraordinary economic story. So at first it seemed to me everybody was selling shoes or clothes or the same stuff as every other shop. And how on earth were they competing in this market? What was this market? And so I delved into that. And, over the years also undertook a massive survey where we interviewed 400 shoppers and 300 shopkeepers to really get a quantitative and qualitative understanding of how that business works. And in that study, and also in the personal collection of stories and the mapping of what people were selling and also how those businesses work and how the buildings work, I came to understand many things around the trader's risk in that space. There's signs up that say things like, as normal buildings, as buildings often do, that, this building takes no responsibility for the following risks. And, on the one hand, it looks like people don't carry risk. They carry enormous risk. There's obviously the competitive risk. There's the risk of being migrants in South Africa, where through our laws, we illegalize people so easily. They're political asylum seekers, but that asylum paper doesn't hold for many months. And then you become illegalized again and have to reapply. And so often people are in this in-between space. And that means that they're excluded from banking. They're excluded from taking proper leases in buildings because they don't have solid enough status. So that's a risk. A major threat on the streets of Jeppe is the police action, which comes in under the valid sort of purpose of policing counterfeit goods. But it is brutal. It goes way beyond counterfeit. It's extremely regular. And behind it is a lot of corrupt activity. So in our study, many people had gifted police through bribery, had been brutally assaulted in these raids. And the police raids are a theme that's picked up in the book, but are a major threat in the space. And at the same time, the ordinary policing, which we desperately require in these streets, protection of life, management of the traffic, is not being done effectively. So that is a real issue, Tabi, because I believe that in a city that's really flailing, we're really struggling. We read so much about the infrastructure challenges in the city, about many things under enormous stress. Here is an opportunity that makes a part of Johannesburg a global port for goods that come in from China, that are repackaged here, and the bulk is broken and people buy those goods, and many of them are informal small traders from around Southern Africa who come in from other countries to shop here and then take those goods to the far reaches of Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, places that big corporates would wish they could get their goods to, And here we have traders doing this in small-scale ways. And we've turned this part of Johannesburg then into an entrepot. So a particular kind of port that operates like Singapore or Hong Kong, but without global pension funds behind it. Nobody's, funded those buildings. These are individual traders, both those who are selling and those who are buying. And what an incredible opportunity for Johannesburg. If we could turn that understanding of the city's role as a port into an opportunity for spreading the value, for adding other services to this. And I think it really offers a real hope for the city.
Mm-hmm. And also from your perspective, what impact does continued migrant, particularly by communities like those from Ethiopia, have on South Africa's urban economy and broader society?
So I have only, the window that I have through what's called Jeppe. People call it Jeppe. It's not Jeppe's town as we know it in Johannesburg. It's called Jeppe because of the major street on which people trade, which was Jeppe Street. It's now Rahima Musso Street. So that's my window into migrants, and it's into migrant entrepreneurs, people who have crossed half the continent to come here for multiple reasons. There are many reasons to leave, as there are people leaving, but who come here and who open shops. And within that part of Johannesburg, they have increased the rentals and therefore increased the property market, or massively enhanced the property market in that space. It means that there's more rates going to the city, massively more from that space. They have repurposed, in some cases upgraded buildings. And so if you go along Small Street, there's extraordinary shop fronts that you get. So it's really bringing into the city a very vibrant urban space. I'm not going to condone the stressing of buildings where there's overcrowding of buildings and where there's been, there's stress on buildings. I think that we should be addressing that and that landlords should be addressing that. But it's a massive, vibrant, sort of insurgent urbanism that's happening in our city. And of course, also bringing, it's not a tourist space, but it does bring, in this case, an Ethiopian cultural space into the area because people are selling Ethiopian food, spices, coffee, clothing, performing the traditional ceremonies around the space. And so that also helps add to the diversity that Johannesburg is as the most diverse city on the continent.
And also your book touches on violence and religious tensions in Jeppe. So can you tell us more about these dynamics and how they coexist with the thriving business community in Jeppe?
So I don't talk much about religious tensions because I understand my limitations not to understand religion and so on. But people did report to me that there's a mixture. Sometimes tensions that exist in Ethiopia, it's a country of 80 tribes, do manifest in Johannesburg, but very often those do not create tension in Jeppe because it's fundamentally a place to do business. So people will say we leave our politics behind because of business in the space. But of course, business is also a competitive space. And in some cases, people might trade together in certain groups that may relate to their own ethnic attachments or even religious attachments. That does happen. So the violence that people are most aware of and that most report on is really the violence I've talked about, which is, unfortunately, it's a policing violence in the space. But it's obviously it's a cutthroat entrepreneurialism when you are trading such similar goods in such small spaces. And so it's also a study in that kind of entrepreneurship and how people find support both within their community and less so as more and more people come and as the migration becomes more sophisticated and entrenched. Like when people arrived 20, 25 years ago, of course, they would get help immediately from within their community. That's less so because it's a more settled space. But the interesting links between Ethiopian entrepreneurs and Chinese suppliers and how they were able to carve relationships of trust and certain shops getting sort of special treatment from a particular wholesaler and getting a regular supply from those people are interesting.
And lastly, what are you hoping readers take away after reading your book?
So I hope that the book will become part of, we love to talk about Johannesburg. It's like the city we love to hate and hate to love, and people are so fascinated by the city. And I think also we're a city of people who are willing to put in everything to make a change. We're dreamers, we're always pioneers in the city. And I hope that this book will become part of those conversations. It's not a book to sit in academia, although it crosses, got interesting things around migration, around economics, around spatial development, and around changes in Johannesburg. But it's also a story of the human spirit and of many human stories in it. And I hope that it becomes part of the conversations that we have in Johannesburg. And if we take one thing from it, it should be that this is an enormous economy. And there's a possibility of hope here, both in just the sheer size of the economy and then the multiple ecosystems within it, which could become the web of other economies. But it's an extraordinary story. I've been so privileged to hear and to be able to document so many of these stories. And of course, within it is also my own story of the 15 years of working in the space.
That was Tanya Zack speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about her book, The Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a Pod City.